I'm willing to bet it's in like that group of trees that is now the on-ramp, honestly. We recently visited the traditional lands of the Nisqually people in search of the treaty tree. Its history exists as a symbolic and physical landmark of tribal sovereignty for Native nations in and around South Puget Sound. Our journey brought us together with tribal leaders who shared the continuing significance of treaties and tribal sovereignty. We know the Medicine Creek Treaty was signed near here, down in Nisqually, and actually very close to the Medicine Creek Cafe. So here we're going to jump into our research and see if we can find any more clues to help narrow our search. What is a treaty?
Well, a treaty is a binding agreement between one side and another. In this case, we have the Treaty of Medicine Creek, 1854. The Nisqually, Puyallup, and Squaxins signed the Treaty of Medicine Creek with the federal government.
The Nisqually are one example of many sovereign tribal nations in the region. Each distinct nation's sovereignty has existed long before the United States. The Stevens Treaties were signed in the 1850s. Do treaties still matter, and why should students learn about them?
Treaties will matter as long as the Constitution is alive today. There is no way the treaties can be overturned and the Native American people will lose their way of life if the Constitution remains today. The Constitution should be upheld not only by the federal government, but should be recognized by the state government, but it should also be acknowledged by every citizen, because not only is that treaty half of the Native Americans' treaty and responsibility to uphold, but it's the other half of American citizens to take ownership to it, be proud of it, and implement it and retain it.
I want to be precise because the language is very important in the treaty, and sometimes it can just be washed over, right? So this is 1854, the Treaty of Medicine Creek. Article 1, the said tribes and band of Indians hereby cede, relinquish, and convey to the United States all their right and title to the lands occupied by them. All of it. Everything you've ever known. Every piece of land, where you hunted, where you fished, where you went on, day hikes with your family, where you gathered roots and berries, where our women went to give birth to our children, where we buried folks.
For 10,000 years, Nisqually has occupied this area. The river that flows from the summit of the mountain to the mouth of the Puget Sound was that lifeline. And in between the mountain and the mouth of the river, there's this beautiful prairie and vast land that, they gathered their, roots and all that nutrients they needed when they were coming across the grass. The resources that were here for them at that time were abundant, right? Were everywhere. Walking across the back of the salmon, the tide goes out, your table was set with all the shellfish and clams that you could eat.
So as we're trying to track down history, one of the first places that I'm going to start looking is Google Maps. So looking at Medicine Creek Treaty marker, what do we get? I see a hit for Treaty of Medicine Creek National Memorial, and that is about where it should be. Here is an interesting photo of Interstate 5 being built, and it looks like you can see the tree in the background. And it even says here that the Department of Highways was careful to avoid the treaty tree when it was being built in the 60s. Through the research, there is a marker up the hill from I-5 from us. There is one further in the Nisqually Valley in front of a gas station, and then we have this photo. So we have a lot of different clues that maybe they can help triangulate where we're going today.
But the brilliance, I think, of our ancestors is reflected in Article 2. This kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. There is, however, reserved for the present use and occupation of the said tribes and bands the following tracts of land. So the Nisqually said, okay, we're going to give you all of that, But we also want to reserve this for us. It's got to be a piece of land where we can exist on the river, something that we're familiar with, so we can exist as a people. So that's the part of the brilliance of our ancestors, that word reserved, right? Nobody gave us anything. The federal government doesn't give us anything. State government doesn't give us anything. Thurston County doesn't give us anything. Local municipalities don't give us a thing. We reserve those rights in exchange for hundreds of thousands of acres of land and all the natural resources that existed on those lands.
So here we are, arriving at the marker. Stands out quite a bit. So this is an old granite marker. Some of it is a little hard to read. Shenandoah Medicine Creek Treaty says 1¼ miles northwest, where Governor Stevens held council with Nisqually, Puyallup, and Squaxin Indians December 24th through 26th, 1854. This stone erected by Washington State Historical Society in 1922. One spot checked off our list. Let's head to our next destination.
Article 3 reads, "The right of taking fish at all usual and accustomed grounds and stations is further secured to said Indians in common with all citizens of the territory," right? Together with the privilege of hunting, gathering roots and berries, and pasturing their horses on open and unclaimed land. So usual accustomed grounds and stations means where we have always done that for thousands and thousands of years, right? Just because you move us on a reservation doesn't mean we can't go gather in there anymore, or hunt there anymore, or fish there anymore, okay? And the right of taking fish specifically, that's the brilliance of our ancestors. They knew we would need that to survive and exist as human beings. They knew if we lost salmon, we were probably dead and gone. We didn't have a chance, right? That's what we subsisted on, was salmon. That's how important it is to the Nisqually people.
My grandmother would always say that to us, talk about that, exercising your right, exercise your right. If we don't exercise this right, we will no longer exist. As long as the grass grows and the river flows, you may hunt, fish, and gather in your usual and accustomed fishing stations, hunting grounds, rivers, streams, lakes.
In common with all citizens of the territory. So in common means, if you break it down in one word, it would be equal, right? It's equal. If you break down the word equal mathematically, it's 50%. If you have 100% of something, you get 50, we get 50. We use the language that, precedented law, established law, to defend our treaty rights.
It seems like, looking at the landscape horizon, we have the creek, we have that bend, we have that wide spot, we have that bare patch, which is right there, and I can see how it kind of bends down there. So if we were to line this up, and you could see through those fir trees, like that's the spot in this photo. Would be right down there on the other side of I-5, right by the creek. So we have done our online research, we have followed our clues, we have sought out higher vantage points, and everything brings us back to the water. It brings us back to the land. We think that where the treaty tree was in this photo is today presently on the refuge side of the on-ramp for Interstate 5 going towards Lacey and Olympia.
And so when we're setting that net at Frank's Landing every Sunday during fishing season, there's something special about that because it's over 100 years of our family fishing in the same set. And I think about that. I think about the changes of the river. I think about the changes in the state that we've seen, and to think that we're still fishing in this little fishing hole along the Nisqually River when everything else has built around us. Just paradise.
This is an incredibly special place. It's a very sacred space that the Nisqually ancestors and the Puyallup and the Squaxin and all of the tribal representatives that came here to advocate for their sovereignty and to exercise that sovereignty with the United States, with Governor Stevens as as the U.S. representative, like, that's always here, regardless of what human imprint we leave behind.
Native Americans are working hard to remain part of who this America is as the first Americans. So as long as America lives, as long as the Constitution lives, therefore the treaty shall live.